You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, welcome to the Choose FI Radio podcast. Today, we are going to be speaking with Don Wettrick, who teaches an innovation class at Noblesville High School in the suburbs just out of Indianapolis. My understanding is he basically heard a Daniel Pink TED Talk that lit a spark and convinced him that he wanted to have a larger impact on the world. He took this idea to his principal, and they are radically transforming the educational process through this innovation class. While most kids are simply trying to beat the curve, his students are creating business plans, filing patents, and giving lectures at Stanford. So today, let's dive in. Let's extract every little bit of actionable information that we can get from Don. Let's find out how this class actually started and the results he has seen as he took this from something that was in his imagination to something that he has now created. There's proof of concept. Let's find out how we can take what he has learned and implement in our own lives and in the lives of our kids as we all enter into this brave new world and gig economy. Really, really excited about this. And to help me with this conversation, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Jonathan, I am doing great. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this episode with Don for quite some time. He really encapsulates many of the tools and the attributes that we talk about on this podcast. The first and most obvious is get up and take action. Also, something that you brought is there is no they. There's no they coming around the corner to save everybody. It has to be you. You need to stand up. And in Don's case, he was a teacher, a high school teacher, and he looked at a problem and he decided to take action. He became the they. That is the coolest aspect of this. And I just can't wait to hear what him and his students are up to. And this should be a wonderful conversation. So with that, Don, welcome to the show.
Quietly blushing in the background. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the nice introduction.
No, you're welcome, but it's all well-deserved, and you actually have proof of concept at this point. And while I can't wait to talk about that proof of concept, I want to go back to the beginning. What are you doing, and what series of events leads you to try something that no one else is doing? This isn't something where someone else had this thing and it was just working, and you just replicated it. You started from scratch. Where does this come from?
The origin story is, and I still have this email to this day. It was an email that said, "Watch this." This was like 7 years ago, and it was Daniel Pink's TED Talk. My borderline ADHD kicked in, and I had to watch it then and there. And so it was on my lunch break, and I watched it, and I was like, whoa. So if our unit of monetization in school is grades, do kids learn in spite of grades? I showed it to them the next period, and I let them watch it, and they're like, hey, guys, what do you think? And they're like, kind of cool. I think at the time I was teaching, this was a freshman English class. And I said, well, what if I gave you a day a week, like Friday, where you could work on the things you've always wanted to work on? And they're like, yeah. And all of a sudden they started falling in love with the idea. Like, yeah, like I could do things that I always wanted to do. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, wouldn't this be cool? Because Dan gets in there and talked about, how Google made a lot of their famous inventions during what they called the Google time. So I started it. And mind you, I shouldn't have started it in April because, it's the school year's almost over. So anyway, I got it off to a start and thud. They said that they wanted to do these things, but actually doing it, they just sat and they looked at me and they waited for instruction. And I was like, wait, these are the things you said you wanted to do. Yeah, but how am I going to get a good grade on this? How am I going to get an A? And I'm like, wait, this was almost the opposite of that. Like, what do you love? What do you want to do? And that is when I quickly realized, A, we reap what we sow. We've told students for years to sit down and shut up and wait instructions. Now, all of a sudden, I told them to go without instructions. That didn't compute. And even though they like to say that, it's like somebody saying, like, I'm going to be an influencer on YouTube. Well, how many videos have you recorded? Well, none. But somehow I'm going to be an influencer. And so I was like, guys, you told me you wanted to do this. Yeah, we did. And it was funny because in reality, the 20% time, as then it was called, it worked for about 20% of my students. and they were the C&D students. It got off to a rocky start, but that's also when I learned that really it's not their fault. And by the way, most adults are guilty of this as well, of having that big New Year's resolution, but then the follow through of being nah. So that was the inspiration. It went okay. Again, though, the pockets of really cool projects were coming from students I didn't see work before. And so I asked my principal, I'm like, hey, do you think that I could have this as its own class? And he laughed and he said, no, but I heard yes. and so he told me, he's like, hey, Don, if you see a Daniel Pink course description in the state of Indiana catalog, then maybe. And so just like in Dumb and Dumber, I'm like, so you're saying I've got a chance. Long story made short, there was a very vague course description in the state of Indiana that was so vague that I used it until we ended up writing our own description a couple years later. But then it was off and running.
So Don, I'm picturing the other 80% of students. In another talk, you described them as, I'm not happy with a sweet, subservient student. I'm picturing these kind of rule followers. Where does that stem from? Have you ever looked back to the elementary school level or even before, maybe to parenting, and see like when does that shift occur when a kid is curious?
So yes. Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that. You can almost exactly point to third grade. And I don't know, well, actually I know where you guys live, but I'm just going to take a guess that in most states, the state standardized test starts when? In third grade. Kindergarten, I mean, think about how great show and tell is. You know, you're really fired up about that app or that toy or that thing that you want to bring in. You want to learn something about it. You want to be the master of it. And you want to tell other kids, this is my thing. Show and tell is freaking amazing. Then all of a sudden, first grade kicks in. You start picking up some skills. But no matter what, education is the things that you need to learn, but the things you want to learn as well. Then all of a sudden, this super serious thing kicks in that the school might lose their funding if you don't memorize these useless set of facts. Oh, you know what? I shouldn't say that. I'm being unfair. If you memorize these set of facts that may be important or may not be, and all of a sudden, the school shifts from wanting to learn to forcing you to comply. And that's the biggest difference. And yes, it almost universally starts in third grade. And by the way, this isn't just me pontificating. This is actually data. They've been looking at when kids stop liking school, and it's third grade.
I think we need to almost slow down and talk a little bit more about this idea of internal motivation. And actually not to take the Daniel Pink talk, because we'll put that in the show notes and everybody should watch that, but just to really explain exactly what it is that we're talking about. And I would love for you to come back and even give a better explanation of this. But my understanding is basically rewards, offering someone incentives to complete a project faster works very well for simple tasks. Build a wall, do this faster. It does not work well for anything that requires any type of creativity, looking for a solution that's not apparently obvious. That was my biggest takeaway. Is that kind of where you're at as well with this? Oh,
yeah. Those simple tasks are all we've really done throughout school. Because, let's break down what Dan said, mastery, autonomy, purpose. Mastery in the sense that you want to work on things that are important to you. I've seen skateboarders, they have to do a kickflip. They'll break their collarbone doing it, but they'll again and again try it until they master it. Flappy Birds. You've seen this with video games, like confounding, like, why am I still doing this? Rubik's Cube. Throughout time, we've like things that confound us and we have to just get it right. We want to get it right. That's an 8, right? So then you got autonomy. Could you just leave me alone for a little bit? Can I work on this on my own? And then purpose. What I'm working on has meaning. Think about, and I'm not trying to make fun, but think of your average lesson in school. Like, hands go up. When am I ever going to use this in real life? Well, you're not, but you need to learn it anyway. Why? There is no sense of mastery. Like, okay, if I get done with this problem, I'll be done with it. When I memorize this theorem, I can forget it next week. There is no sense of you want to master it. There is no sense of purpose. If a lot of students are saying, oh, when am I going to use this in real life? If your only answer is because it's on the test, that's a bad thing. Why do I have to need to know this? Because you need to pass the test. Okay, but really, when in life am I going to use this? Well, never really, but still. That's not setting our kids up for the future. The curriculum that we came up with was in 1890. And for the most part, we haven't changed it too much. So when all of a sudden, like if it's our job to prepare the kids for the future, having them be quiet, subservient rule followers, that's not hiring. Having them memorize a bunch of facts, unless you're Ken Jennings and you can make a living off of Jeopardy, like that's no longer in style. No one's going to come up to like, hey, we want to hire you. What can you do? What do you want me to tell you who sang Putting on the Ritz in 1982? No, but we do need a lot of fresh ideas. We know like our competition's catching up to us. What do you think that we should do? I don't know, but I can tell you a lot about the Pythagorean theorem. Okay. So, this shift is a really serious thing, and just quiet, subservient rule followers is out.
Don, that's interesting because I see my daughter who's in 4th grade now, and she has such this internal motivation to learn new things and create stories and build things. But yet in school, we go to a wonderful school. She really has a top tier teacher. But unfortunately, because of state rules, she has to take a course called Virginia Studies. So you talk about memorizing just dopey, silly facts. Why would she ever need this when you can Google any single one of these things in 2 seconds, right? So to me, that seems like just a huge waste of time. And obviously you teach high school students, but this starts at the beginning, thinking about how to learn what an elementary school process should look like if you want to not create those sweet subservient students, but people who are thinking differently, who are motivated intrinsically. What does that look like at an elementary school level?
Love your questions. It starts with the 20% time model. By the way, I'm not a fan of 20% time model at high school anymore. It's simply not enough time. But let's just say the average 3rd grade classroom, we're talking 20 to 30 minutes on a Friday. And by the way, my township that I teach at, I actually get to go to some of the elementary schools and work with some of the teachers that want to do this because innovation is born in kindergarten. We beat it out of them by 3rd grade. So therefore, 3rd grade teachers, give me 20 to 30 minutes on a Friday. That's it. What they do is they ask, they can either ask probing questions. They can say, what are you interested in? You can do a collect and connect session. You can ask, what a kid's really hyped up about and connect those two. So say the kid's like, I'm into Pokemon Go and I'm also into Fortnite. And you're like, awesome. Could you like create a game and draw some pictures on what a game would look like if you took Pokemon Go and Fortnite together? Those kids will freak out because they're passionate about, they want to master that. They want to start drawing a concept for an idea. They'll want to be left alone for a while to be working on that, or better yet, in teams of 3. And then they'll want to present it to the class because it means something to them. You give a kid like that 20 minutes on a Friday and they will explode with creativity and not imagination. Imagination is just thinking it up. Creativity is bringing it to the world. And that starts in grade school. Then, ironically enough, when things get super serious in middle school, the battle cry here all the time is, "Oh, when can I do this? I have to cover the standards." Well, most middle schools are teamed, right? So give me 1 month, 1 day a month. This week it'll be science class. It will hold the 20% time. Next week it'll be the social studies. Next week it'll be the English, et cetera, et cetera. Then I think that's kind of the tie that binds. And by the way, I do a side hustle. I consult with a lot of schools and actually homeschool parents as well on how to bring innovation and creativity to the classroom. But middle school is the perfect breeding ground because you can share these responsibilities. And then lastly, and I know you didn't ask, but I have to shamelessly say, this is why I'm also on a mission to get an innovation and open source learning class into every high school I can, because 20 minutes on a Friday just isn't cutting it anymore.
Don, this really hits home to me because I have a kindergartner and I have a 4th grader. And according to what you're saying, by 3rd grade, they've already learned these negative habits, though I guess they would be considered positive in normal society. But for the point of our conversation, they're these sweet subservient students. How can a parent who, okay, if I take it that I'm not going to change my school system, and I don't want to use that limiting negative belief, certainly, but let's just argue that, okay, the school system's not going to change, but I want to help my children as much as I can. What can I do outside of class to help them think differently?
Well, first of all, the people that tried to, this is the homeschool revolution. And I'm a public school teacher and love public school, but sometimes parents get kind of frustrated. And my answer is I would recommend a 2-to-1 producer versus consumer ratio. First of all, of course, this hits home because you guys are producers. I mean, how much has this podcast changed your life? And I know the answer to that. Because you guys are producing content. You guys are consuming it too. You're listening to other podcasts, but you're producing. The same thing for your child. Your child, actually, we just got into this argument with Grant. I have a 9-year-old and we're starting to limit his YouTube time. And I'm like, all right, Grant, you're old enough now that you're going to have to get your own channel. And so if you want an hour of YouTube time, you're going to have to work on 2 hours to get that 2-to-1 ratio. By students being consumers, and by the way, you can make these private, but by getting them in the habit of creating and not just watching is one of the great things. And then also having them deep dive into passions they already like, creating something new. Should your daughter going back to my own daughters, should your daughter go like My Little Pony? Is there a different character you could create? And what kind of traits would they have? How would they blend with the other ponies? What kind of conflict would arise with the other ponies now that you introduce this pony, et cetera, et cetera? Because they already have this, oh, I freaking love My Little Pony. So they're going to already probably work on it. It's not going to be a punishment. And if mom and dad think it's cool, then you're also doubling down that bond of I value what you value. And they can start becoming creators however young you want, to be honest with you. Now, the exploitation of it, I mean, I've seen some YouTube channels that it's a borderline on child labor laws because mom and dad are obviously trying to make money off of, their 8-year-old son unboxing toys. But I really would like for them to be more producers than just consumers.
As I'm thinking about consumption, I think as you spend more time producing, even your consumption changes. So this is what something that I found very interesting in my own life. My idea of consumption now, like consuming entertainment, is no longer, Grey's Anatomy, right? I always beat up on that show. Rather, it is learning a new skill set for my job. It's infotainment. That's kind of almost a natural paradigm shift as you go farther down this producer lane, because that becomes your hobby, because that becomes your joy. You end up wanting to consume entertainment that will then allow you to produce better. I mean, that's just a weird thing that I've noticed in my own life. And I'm wondering, do you see that replicated with the kids that you're working with?
Iron sharpens iron. And yes, it does. Matter of fact, I always sound like Johnny Cochran when I say this. I want to create seekers and peakers, not moaners and groaners. And by that, we as a class start to become our own little group. And we together seek opportunities. Instead of just looking out at the world and saying, oh, everything sucks. Like, if we're listening to what things suck, because then my students go, oh, there's a solution to there. And here's kind of circling back to your answer. When you congregate with people like these, you can peek around the corner. You can have conversations. You go from not listening to some mindless, stupid TMZ-laced awfulness, and instead you start listening to Freakonomics. You start listening to Tim Ferriss. And the moaners and groaners out there aren't going to create anything. And so, yes, I'm exactly like you. I haven't watched a sitcom or a drama or I think maybe I saw the last Star Wars, but I feed my brain now, and that has changed universally. Matter of fact, funny side story. This is almost the origin story of my daughter's podcast. I do a fair amount of keynote speaking, and there was one that was drivable. It was in Illinois, and I was driving. We were listening to the radio, and all of a sudden there's Celebrity Minute, gossip, trash came on. And before I could turn the channel, Ava just started going off. She's like, this is our problem, Dad. I'm like, what? She's like, my generation, she's Generation Z. She's like, my generation will tell you all things about what Kim Kardashian just said, but they don't even know who Tim Ferriss is. They have no idea who Naveen Jain is. And that's a problem.
Brad, you're going to be having these conversations with Anna in 5 years. Get ready. That's what's coming your way.
I love it.
And so I was like, yeah. And she's like, Generation Z needs better mentors. And then she paused. Mentors. Dad, I've got it. I'm like, what's that? I'm going to introduce my generation to better mentors. I was like, Ava, that's a really good idea. And then Ava being Ava, she's like, and I don't need your help. And I'm like, why? She's like, because I've got a podcast of my own. She's like, well, I don't think I'm going to be robbing guests from you. I don't need that. I'm going to find my own people. I'm like, oh, okay. So backing up what you just asked, even that, it's shaping the way she looks at the world too. And the students in this class, we become like this little group of opportunity seekers, very much in the sense that, the FI community, they collectively start adding to the pot of knowledge and like, hey, what about this hack and what about that hack? Which, by the way, let me just get this out shamelessly. When I start falling down the rabbit hole of your guys' podcast, the teacher with the supplemental over and above the Roth IRA and over and above the 403B, was that the 527 plan?
Dude. 457.
Oh, so I'm saying 457. Oh my gosh. Yeah. all of a sudden I was like, dang, I thought I knew a lot. But I've been falling down the rabbit hole of just your guys' tips and techniques and all the different stories and everything else. So now I listen to stuff like this almost exclusively. It's been fun.
It is a deep hole, my friend, a very deep hole.
That is really cool, Don. Hey, I'm curious. A minute ago, you were talking about the value of community, right? And we certainly talk about that often on our podcast. We see it in the FI community, but you also were alluding to seeing that in the classroom. And I wonder if there's that sense of camaraderie from the students in this innovation class that, hey, maybe this isn't the norm, but if the 20 of us are doing it, then maybe it is normal. And I guess to kind of piggyback on that, how do you see them helping each other on their path to thinking a little bit differently?
The depths of your questions amaze me. It's actually almost been a problem. And the reason why is we become so tight-knit within this community. And yes, we do help one another, that I hate to say this, it starts to affect some of the relationships with the people not in this class. Once you can think for yourself, well, okay, again, the microcosm of my daughter listening to, let's all stand by for what Kim Kardashian said. She's like, she'll make fun of a kid for that. If somebody's obsessed with what, and I don't know who some of these latest celebrities are, but obsessing. Did you hear what Justin Bieber said? And my daughter would like, who the hell cares? And yes, this community within the class is like, let's be positive. It's cool to say things suck. It's cool to say, I'll never. It's cool to say, the man has kept me down. It's hard to say, I can do this. And so when you're around those seekers and peakers, then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, man, if you need help with that, you'll get feedback from the people in here and they'll give you honest feedback. Hey, your design really doesn't look good, but I can help. Meanwhile, your friends will be like, oh my gosh, it looks great. So, that community has been great within the room, but it does kind of affect some of their teen relationships with them just blindly following orders.
How does it affect, once we start talking about specifically your class? So we talked about how it affects the relationship, kind of this, they've broken out of the matrix and now it's kind of hard to go back in and just pretend that everything's okay and everything should just be the way that it was before. I get that. That makes sense. What about at a granular level? You have kids that see how dramatic of an effect it is when they no longer are focused on that immediate tangible reward of a grade and they start actually creating stuff. What does that mean, though, for this freshman that's in your class that has 4 more, maybe 8 more years of grades really mattering?
One, you can only be able to take this as, actually, you can take it 2 to 3 years if you want to. The earliest you can take it is a sophomore, but you also are bringing up the second negative point, and that is sometimes grades go down. We have seen what I call the Marine effect. And by that, Marines look like Marines. Really small guys get bigger and really big guys get leaner. And a Marine ends up looking like a Marine. It's scary how they're all very similar in shape and in size. So my straight DNF students start getting some C's because they're like, okay, I really want to work for this class and I can't fail out. But consequently, some straight A students start getting some B's because they're like, I'll get done with the minimum amount of homework. And if I get a B in this class, so be it. But I'm going to work on my business plan. I'm going to work on my event. I'm going to work on my podcast, et cetera, et cetera. So they start prioritizing. Now, the hard thing is that sometimes parents justifiably get a little upset. Hey, my kid used to be a straight A student. He starts taking your class and now he's getting some B's. What the heck? And I'm like, I'm sorry. But what they've been working on is amazing. And for that matter, the parents have 200 years on their side. For 200 years, if you just keep your head down and just comply, you'll get to go to a good college. And if you go to a good college, everything will work out. A lot of parents haven't looked at the data yet on that. So it's a tough sell. But a lot of times the students will either find that equilibrium, but I'm not going to deny it. It does make their grades go down a little bit on the straight A student.
Don, have you had any parents come into you in that scenario where their student maybe has gone down in grades, but they're okay with it? They, being the parent, they're okay with it. Has that ever crossed your path that they're just so astounded by what's going on in the classroom and maybe changes they've seen in their child?
Oh, most are supportive. Most are like, well, to be fair, I get a lot of students that are in that C realm. So they're just like, oh my gosh, my kid has direction. They have found a passion. They have found a calling. They have found maybe an occupation. But yeah, I mean, sometimes my straight A students, the parents are like, you know what? They're happy. You know what? They have purpose. You know what? They have drive. May not be for school exclusively, but they see past it. And I appreciate that. However, I will say, this is several years ago, we had one parent that she would not let her son take my class because it was not weighted. And she had mathematically figured it out that if he took one less class that wasn't weighted, he might not finish valedictorian. And that was a tough thing because the kid wasn't pleased with that decision. And that was a year we got invited to go speak out at Stanford, and we got to be guests at Google and Facebook, and he missed out on all these experiences. But you know what? His mom was really, justifiably proud. But he was like, what if I would have finished number 2? I would have gotten to do these other things. So yeah, some parents are still very much about the grade. And again, to be fair, I understand. I do. There may have been a scholarship up for grabs that he might not have got if he had finished number 2. I don't know. So I'm not passing judgment, but for the most part, they're very supportive.
Don, you talked about mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And I'm curious, is this like a binary 0 or 1 type thing? I mean, I assume many students, unfortunately, in the normal paradigm of our school system, really have 0 of these 3. Have you ever thought, or are there scenarios where they can have 1 or 2 of those 3? Is there a point of inflection where that actually shifts, where autonomy in and of itself is valuable, or autonomy and mastery? Like, is that a reasonable question? Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, yeah. I love your questions. So let's go over some of these things. So mastery. If I want to master Flappy Birds, if you all of a sudden just want to master a video game and that's all you want to do, that's called a problem. So you can want to master something and not be good. You want to experience the greatest high off of meth. Not good. Autonomy. I just want to be left alone. Not good. And a matter of fact, mastery, autonomy, purpose can be used for powers of evil too. But I like it when there are all 3 involved, especially that purpose thing. I think that what most people lack is purpose. I think that most depression is derived from lack of purpose. We're voyeurs. Why do people watch sports? They wish that could be them. Why do people watch movies? Wish that could be them. And as a matter of fact, as a litmus test, just randomly go out to people and like, what are you passionate about? I guarantee you 90% of the people that respond will give you somebody else's dream. What are you passionate about? Oh, the Colts. Oh, my band. Oh, Star Wars. Somebody else's work, somebody else's dream. Meanwhile, the person that has, that they're trying to master a skill, whether they're a great fly tyer, a carpenter, they have an art, they have a skill that they're trying to master. They have time where they build it into their week. They're trying to get that great, jazz drum ensemble put together. And then and I have it for a purpose. It's not just about me. It's about what I'm trying to do in the world. You put all those 3 together, especially with a purpose. Now you have a happy, fulfilled person. But instead, too many people I know, and I'm saying mostly adults too, their passion is looking at what everybody else is doing. I think the greatest waste of human potential right now is Instagram and Facebook. What is everybody else doing? Why am I not doing that? I hate my life. Why am I not on vacation? Etc., etc. Put in that purpose in there and you've got a much different person. You have a much different direction in life.
Twitter's totally good though, right?
Yes, because that's where actually, you know what though? Twitter is more spray and pray. People don't fall down the rabbit hole as much. It's never of much in depth. It's a couple things here, a couple things there. I personally love LinkedIn. Everybody there is I shouldn't say everybody. Most people on LinkedIn are so upbeat. It's a lot of times productivity hacks. It's how they're getting better. So if I'm going to fall down a rabbit hole of social media, it's LinkedIn.
All right. Very cool. Yeah, that's the part I landed on, the value of Twitter. So much powerful stuff there. And I thought what we could do, we've talked about this at the high level. I want to go granular. I want to see what is actually happening inside this classroom. And there's 2 reasons that I think there will be value for the audience. One is there's a lot of teachers in our audience. There's a lot of teachers that were looking to have an impact, are looking for a way to empower children. And for them, it's not about just helping more of them get straight A's. It's having an impact on the lives of the kids that are in their care. I can sense that. My wife's a teacher. I know she feels that. The grades are great and they may be a metric, but it's not ultimately, her purpose. Let's talk about the classroom. What's actually going on in the classroom? What does a day look like? And what have your students produced because of this way of looking at things?
So the class is about 6 to 7 weeks long, and then the rest of the year is open source learning. The first 6 weeks, we start discovering how to think for yourself, how to reframe problems, some of the basics of innovation, some little sprinkled things of what we call design thinking or things of that nature. We even give them some time, about a week, to curate and have a good social media presence. No FMLs, no duck-faced selfies, no double middle fingers, you being a professional. Which, by the way, puts them so ahead of the curve, they have advantages that are unheard of because they're 16 years old on social media broadcasting what they're doing good in the world. Then, after that 6 to 7 week training period is over, we do some things that I force them to do. And I hate to say that. Like they start finding projects of their own that they want to work on, but sprinkled throughout the year, I ask them to go work with a struggling nonprofit. And by struggling, it can't be a staff of over 100 people, no Red Cross, no, Salvation Army. I mean, those are all great organizations, but I'm talking about like a battered women's shelter that has a staff of 3. And so a lot of times, if you can't think out the box, you can think really innovative within a box. So a nonprofit is like, oh, here's our set of problems, and boy, do we need help. Then they can start getting really innovative and helpful to the community. Then second, we have this pitch competition in our state. I don't think that all kids should be entrepreneurs. I don't think that all people should be entrepreneurs, but I think that we should all think like them. So they put together an idea pitch competition. It's healthy for them to do. And then towards the end of the year, actually, we just wrapped this up yesterday. I have them go out and help I have them help a small business within our town. That goes over very well too, just because, again, they can get innovative within that box. Projects that they have launched, oh my gosh. And like you said earlier, we have some patents that have been filed. We have, some of the cooler topics this year. We had 2 students that end up getting to know a guy in Ghana. He and then the 2 Lukes end up raising some money, forming their own nonprofit, and they've just broke ground for a school they're building. And it's not American Red Cross that's building it. They are. Matter of fact, one of the Lukes moved out there right after Christmas break. He graduated in December, and he spent about a month and a half overseeing the project. Then we've got some kids that host events. We've got some students that have been entrepreneurial. They started their own companies. We've got a couple podcasts. We've got a couple of vloggers, et cetera, et cetera. But those are the big, sexy things. The practical things I love too. Like we had, this will be near and dear to your heart. We had a student that wanted to start a stock picking club. Matter of fact, this kind of led to an interesting thing. We have a rule of thirds in my class. So when you want to choose a project, you have to submit a proposal. And the rule of thirds are as follows. Number 1, are you passionate about it? Good. And that's normally where a lot of people stop. Number 2, what skills are you going to acquire because of this project? And number 3, who does it serve other than you? And so the student came up to me and says, hey, I want to be a day trader. I'm like, all right, let's go over the rule of thirds. I said, are you passionate about it? He said, are you kidding? Holds, puts, selling short? I don't know much about these things. This is going to be amazing. I'm like, all right, what skills are you going to acquire? Oh, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn all these tips and tricks and techniques to my advantage. Okay, awesome. And I said, number 3, who is it serving other than yourself? Pause. He said, I don't know. I mean, I want to make money. And I'm like, okay, I respect that, but it's one of my rules. And so he thought about it. He's like, so we have like a kind of a glorified study hall at the end of the day called Academic Lab. He's like, what if I held an academic lab where I'm like a day or 2 ahead of my students? So like I could learn some of these techniques and then I could teach it to them the next day. And then that way I could get number 3 in. I'm like, amazing. Yeah. And then they end up getting into cryptocurrency like a year and a half ago and all these other things. And so having these projects in place has been like, I geek out on what they do. Matter of fact, one of the cooler things just started, 3 of my students just started a business and they're busy already. They're developing for Alexa voice skills, and that's going real well.
I was so struck as you were talking about the 2 Lukes that were helping start that school in Ghana, and this idea of what is a story you tell yourself about yourself. And I wanted to contrast that with a mother that was incredibly concerned about their child hitting that valedictorian and using that as a strategy to probably get them a scholarship and getting them into the school of their choice. There can only be one valedictorian, right? There can only be one, but everybody can explore the story that they tell themselves about themselves. And what these guys did, I got to imagine, looks infinitely more valuable on paper. If they were going to go back and do the traditional route and go to college and get the 4-year degree, to be able to talk about this business plan that they did and that they implemented, is so much more compelling to even something like an admissions office that obviously values grades than being the valedictorian of the class. To me, that really just stood out to me, and I was just curious about your thoughts on that as well.
Well, first of all, with all due respect, Ricky Bobby, there isn't only one valedictorian. There are thousands. This year's graduating class in 2018, there will be hundreds of thousands of valedictorians. How many were invited to go speak at Stanford about their business? That year, 10, and maybe more. I don't know, but considerably less. So with all due respect, I think I'm agreeing with you. I would have jumped at the opportunity. Like, I don't care if I was ironically enough, one of the students that went to that was literally in the graduating class of 579. He was number 579, and he was one that had a patent. He didn't graduate. He just stopped. He went through what should have been his senior year. He's like, I'm good. I'll take my GED. By the way, this kid was really, really smart. School just wasn't his thing. I chase experience. And so back to what you said a couple minutes ago, to the kid that used to chase the grade, now they're chasing purpose. Now they're chasing experience. Now they're chasing opportunities.
Don, you're someone who obviously is challenging these preconceived notions, these societal norms, but how do you try to expand that just beyond yourself? Like, how do you try to look at this problem of not only education, but for me, it's college, right? Like $250,000 for a private college seems crazy to me when I'm not sure, not only is there opportunity cost of 4 years spent there, but what are people doing necessarily? Partying a lot, making some friends, okay, some connections, and learning some, but it's kind of indeterminate what they're actually learning. But that's the societal norm, right? So it's almost like table stakes of you need a college degree to do X. But I'm looking at society and saying that can't be the case. That can't be what my daughter, who's in 4th grade now, is going to have to deal with, because I just can't stomach that. It doesn't make sense to me. How do you get beyond just, okay, I know this intuitively for myself, and try to expand that to other people?
First of all, I guess I'm putting my money where my mouth is. My own daughter, by the way, I believe in them choosing their path. But going back to Ava, she's got a 3.9. And at minimum, next year, she's going to take a gap year. Minimum. She might not go to college. And this is by no means a slam on any university, but she wants to go the entrepreneurial route. She's like, if I had to take a class from somebody that has never been an entrepreneur but talks about it, I can't stomach that. And then she said, Alicia and I down, she's like, Dad, and she said in-state, I live in Indiana, and she said a particular well-known school for engineering. And she said, how much is that a year? I said, about $26,000. She says, okay. She says, so about 2 years is roughly $52,000. I said, that's right. She says, how about this? You've already got my college account set aside, right? I'm like, yeah, it's paid for, honey. Grandpa and grandma and mom and I have socked away. And she says, so a 4-year degree in-state is around $100,000. I said, that's right. She says, I'll split you half, and that will be my startup fund.
Brad, why isn't Ava on this call? What happened?
I know, she should be. She'll be on a future podcast. That's amazing.
She's a financial dude. She is well, kudos to my wife. My wife and our whole family, we're 5 people, man. We have lived below our means all our life. Our biggest thing is we set a goal to have our house paid off before 40. And I got the final note on my birthday when I was 40. It's
nice.
Yeah. Anyway, people come up to me like, well, it's easy for you to say all kids should have to go to college. And I'm like, no, some don't. And by the way, some do. You want to go to medical, you got to go to college. You want to go into advanced engineering, got to go to college. But there's some things that you're like, I want to be a journalism major. Start a freaking blog. Start a blog. And people are like, well, it's the network you get into college. You know who has an advantage? If you start a network at age 16 or age 22. When you're 22, you're everybody else. When you're 16, oh my gosh, this sounds so braggadocious. A lot of my students are killing it because we know it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so our students are like, okay, let's know people. They'll reach out to people and say, I need to learn with you. I've got this thing that I'm working on. You seem amazing. And a lot of times they won't email George Lucas. They'll email the guy that has a videography studio down the street. You can hack your own learning. And again, this is easy for us to say, I understand. People are like, well, you still need to have a good degree to get a job. Google that, please.
As you're saying this, what's coming to my mind is you have so many people that are in their 30s that are now listening to podcasts and trying to add all this information on, and are thinking, man, what if I knew what I know now when I'm in my teens? Like, in fact, that's one of our questions that we're going to ask you later. What would you tell your younger self? These kids are actually doing it. They're actually learning the stuff that everybody else is learning in their 20s and 30s at the age of 16. And what strikes me is really incredible is that there's so much less competition. There's so few voices that are in those teen years because they're all focusing on trying to beat the curve or get the A. There's so few voices that are going outside of that there's no competition. And so you just get outsized results for that effort that you put in.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that we're trying to change is that paradigm, or at least be a real irritant in the system. And make no mistakes, I'm not making friends everywhere I go. We're winning some people over, but then there's some traditionalists that are like, this is wrong. And it's funny because I've seen it at the bookends. I've seen more innovation from the middle than I have on the ends. And by that, I mean, if you go to a preparatory high school, they have this dreaded word called tradition. Because the way things used to be will always be the way things are. And I'm like, yeah, right. We don't have to adapt. We're this class or this high school. I'm like, okay. All of our students go to Harvard and Yale and Princeton and okay, great. And then on the other hand, and by the way, I understand this, the lower performing schools are chasing safety. They'll brag if they have a bragging point like, hey, we had fewer suspensions this year. We had a lot less violence. And by all means, I want a safe school. That is priority number one. And like, how many businesses did this high school launch? Did you guys host any events that were out of the ordinary? No, but we were very quiet and well behaved in our graduation, which is important. But they're just worried about, again, I understand why, but they're worried about safety. The ones that are concerned is the middle, especially, like the middle class. They're like, they know their jobs are going away. Like they know. No one hasn't seen a grocery store dwindle down and down and down on employees. Everybody's seen the new automated grocery store from Amazon. We have seen so many reports that semi-truck drivers will be automated here soon. They get it. And so they're trying to think, okay, what's next? That's one of the things that we're trying to do. We're trying to send out that message and work with anybody that wants to listen.
As he's saying this, Brad, I don't know if with you as well, but that quote from George Bernard Shaw is coming to mind, that reasonable people adapt themselves to the world, whereas unreasonable people attempt to adapt the world to themselves. And so the conclusion, the obvious conclusion being that all progress therefore depends on unreasonable people. That's what you're describing. And I think that's the benefit of these kids breaking out of the matrix at this younger age, that they then now have their 20s and 30s and 40s, while the rest of us are grappling with an ever-changing reality. They've already observed that, and now they've put actions in place to get in front of it.
I totally agree. I think this is the difference between an improvement versus a new opportunity. There's a lot of school improvement out there. There's a lot of, if you can get this better study technique, or like people want to improve school. Don't stop. You need a new opportunity. And by the way, you can't be innovative unless you know the basics. Like I still think a lot of our modern education is still fine, but you need time for innovation and failure.
And a lot of our schools, their hands are tied as well. I mean, this conversation wasn't intended necessarily to go directly to the source, but I know that as we're recording this in May, I believe this is basically SOL season. And so you talked about needing that safety. That is a performance incentive for different schools, and failure to meet those SOLs really come with some significant drawbacks for the systems themselves.
Yes and no. To the brave and bold go the spoils. I'm at a public school, guys. And this was without, I have asked for apologies, and I have definitely not asked for permission on a lot of things. But I was never shy in the fact that I know what I'm doing is preparing kids for the future. If you want to fire me. But I can go down with that ship. And I think it's going to take some bold superintendents, some bold principals to say, okay, we get it. The state is forcing us to do this, but dang it, we can squeeze out some time for innovation right here. So I don't accept but the system, screw your system. Find a way. Just like the person that wants to get in shape, like, well, when will I ever have time to work out? Every time you need to go to the bathroom, do 10 push-ups. Jonathan, I know you're a push-up and pull-up guy. You integrate your workout into the day. Don't give me your excuses. Just do practical things. So I want schools to quit giving me pass the buck. Will the state find a way and do it?
Don, I hear you completely. I'm curious. This podcast is about taking action. What does this look like 10 years from now if it were perfect? How do you get your innovation class into other schools? How can teachers and parents and other educators listening to this podcast, how can they make a difference in their own community?
Shameless self-promotion, asterisk. Contact me at Don Wettrick on Twitter. I would love to help anybody that's willing. If a parent wants to lead this in a school, or if you are just wanting to do this on your own. Actually, I have, ironically enough, is Gary Vee that kind of scolded me for wanting to try to change schools when I should be trying to do things for the parent. But if I waved a magic wand, every grade school, starting at least at third grade, has a 20% time or genius hour or whatever you want to call it. And you start setting aside time for innovation. At the middle school, it's teamed. You have time for innovation and maybe squeeze in some entrepreneurship. And at the high school level, you have an elective, and I don't like to force it. I think it should be an elective, but there's an elective for students to try things that are relevant. I mean, you guys get this all the time. People bemoaning like, why don't they teach financial skills in high school? Well, sometimes they do. A lot of times it's the econ class that's also an elective. Well, start squeezing in these things. So start giving them time to do innovation class and open source learning because, and by the way, this could save them thousands of dollars. You know, we talked about college being expensive. Fun fact, how many people change their major? A lot. I dare say 70%. You know why they changed their major? Because once they start trying the things that they thought that they were interested in, they realize they don't like it. So if you have a junior that starts trying the things that they might major in and they realize, well, this sucks, I just saved them 25 grand minimum. We start providing this kind of open source learning class in every high school. I think you're going to see a dramatic shift. And the last point, all over the United States, we have these co-working spaces, these startup centers, whatever you want to call them. I want more people to realize, business people included, that the greatest co-working space, the greatest startup center that we have are our schools, and they're tax funded. If you're a local entrepreneur, set aside 8 kids as your focus group. You'll be mesmerized by what you learn. And then the kids will learn from you. I would highly love if more entrepreneurs and business leaders would like to come into the schools and work with our kids.
Well, Don, let's get explicit here because I think there are going to be, I know that we have so many educators in our group, and I know that they have actually joined an educator group on one of our private groups on Facebook just to start having these types of conversations. I know that there are principals, administrators, as well as teachers in that group. And I know that they're going to hear this and immediately want to connect with you. What is the best way for someone to reach out?
Honestly, I'm more active on Twitter than I am email. So at Don Wettrick, that's DonWettrick. You can also email me, don@StartEdUpInnovation.com. We also now have a digital course for schools that kind of want to implement this. I've got as early as 8th grade taking this course and as old as, well, actually I have some 30-year-olds taking this class. That is at futurereadyu.com. That's futureready, the letter U in place of university.com. Or, you know what? I also lurk in on your Facebook page, so they can find me on there.
Awesome, man. And I want to say that, you have captured the imagination of the educational system, as well as some of the greatest entrepreneurial minds in the country, including, we started this episode talking about There Is No They. That's Jeff Hayes from Priceline, who I know has come on your show, has participated with your groups, Tim Ferriss, Gary Vee. I mean, just really the people that are passionate about what you're doing, frankly, it blows my mind. And times are changing, and you have 2 choices. You can just try to keep your head down and do what you can, or you can look for opportunities when it presents themselves and find people that are kind of acting as a guiding light for this new way of tackling this journey that we're all living together. Don, normally that would be the end of the episode, but on this show, we would love to give you the chance to tackle the hot seat. Are you ready for this?
I would be disappointed if there was no time for hot seat.
Let's do it.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right, Don, question number 1, your favorite blog?
I'm going to go favorite blog and podcast combo is still and forever probably will be Freakonomics. I love the Stevens. Love them.
You know, I am a huge fan of the book and even listened to the audiobook. And the only podcast episode of theirs that I have listened to was the one they did most recently with Jack Bogle that just blew my mind. It was totally fantastic.
Everything they do is high quality. I love them.
All right, question number 2. Now, your favorite article of all time. And this can be one that you wrote or somebody else's.
So this came out about 4 months ago, I believe, and it was an article from Mother Jones. And the article title, I believe, is "You Will Lose Your Job to a Robot and Faster Than You Think." It is scary. They, in a Ray Kurzweil kind of way, predict what jobs are going to go away and what it's going to be automated and when we'll see the end of employment. It's a really long article. It's almost a novella, but I highly recommend people take a look at it.
Wow, Don, I could ask a million questions just about that, but for the sake of time, I will not. I think I'm going to read that. Hopefully everyone in the audience reads it. That sounds absolutely fascinating. Question number 3, your favorite life hack.
My favorite life hack was taught by my dad, and this is when you guys will be smiling, and I'll hear your smile through the microphone. My dad's advice to me was always pay yourself first. When I started getting my first paycheck, he's like, "Donnie, make sure you pay yourself first." I'm like, "What's that, Dad?" And he says, "Well, normally what a lot of people do is they get their paycheck, they'll blow through it on the fun things, or adults will get it and they'll pay the things that they have to, and then what's left, they'll do the fun things, and then they may cross their mind of saving. What you should do, son, is you should always take at least 20% of your paycheck, sock it away, pretend it's not there, but that's you paying yourself first. Anything else past that is going to your bills or stupid things." That has stuck with me my entire life.
Chuck Wettrick, getting a shout out on the podcast. Well done.
He's the man.
All right. Question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
I'm going to do 2 things. Penny stocks. And yeah, everybody, just the collective. I'm so disappointed. Penny stocks when everybody was getting rich in 1998. You know, I fell into the trap. I saw some people place bets and had a couple of home runs, 1,200% rate of return, but the majority of them were lose everything. It was Vegas, but worse. There was no free drinks. And then second was right when I first got my credit card in college. I thought it was the coolest thing that I got a Cincinnati Reds credit card, and I went and bought a bunch of CDs, Jimi Hendrix Greatest Hits being the first one, and all of a sudden the bill came. I'm like, wait, this stinks. Why did I do that? And so I learned, even though my dad had taught me better, it literally took my first round of CDs. And I'm talking, and this is how financially frugal I am. I think the bill came to like $54 and I freaked out because I was like, mind you, this is in 1991, but I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. And I don't think I cut up my credit card yet, but I knew that I didn't spend stupidly. But it was a great lesson, those first 5 or so CDs.
Do you have a CD player outside of your car?
No.
All right, there it is. You can put them on your wall, though. They're collectibles.
Are they?
Okay. Not so sure.
The hipsters brought back the cassette and album, so at some point they'll be cool again.
I love your nightmare credit card story is $50. So that's fantastic that it was such a learning lesson and it wasn't $10,000, right? How many people are saddled with thousands of dollars of debt? So well done on the learning lesson, Ray.
Yeah, literally, it was $54.12. I remember. I just completely remember. But again, giving a shout out to Chuck and Sue Wettrick. I was raised by a teacher and a stay-at-home mom. So you do the math on that. Oh, and BT Dubs, I hope my dad's not embarrassed by this. He retired at 58.
Oh, of the same ilk. Well done, sir. Well done.
Yeah.
All right, Don, question number 5, the advice you would give your younger self.
I hope this isn't cliche. Fail. Make a fool of yourself. Be the person on the dance floor that people are pointing at and laughing at, because the bigger the fail, the more the story. The more the story, the more the growth, the more people start looking to you. I didn't take some risks and I regret it. I started taking more risks when I'm 45, and that was kind of crazy because I had 3 kids. So if you're 12, go out and sell door to door. If you're 15, start a podcast. Will people make fun of you? Maybe, but deep down inside, they'll respect it. I wish young Donnie Wettrick would have been more of a producer at age 17 instead of waiting till he was 35.
Don, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This has been fantastic.
I appreciate you guys. I'll be honest with you, I've got to brush up my own skills. You guys, the depth of your questions were blowing me away. But love the podcast, love your entire community. And you guys are seriously helping so many people in a real practical way. I am just thoroughly impressed and so glad I came across your guys' podcast. And by chance, thank you, Vince Puglisi, for introducing us. So I love what you guys do. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the episode today. I hope you got value from the show, and I hope you've been getting value from the episodes up to this point. If you want to support us and what we're doing here at ChooseFI, here are 4 easy ways. 1, leave us an iTunes review. If you want to do that, just go to choosefi.com/iTunes. 2, use our page to sign up for travel credit cards. If you want to travel the world with miles and points instead of your hard-earned dollars, then just go to choosefi.com/cards and get started today. 3, if you're working on the milestones of FI, set up a personal capital account to track your progress and use our affiliate link. It's completely free, and just go to choosefi.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. And 4, and most importantly, find your friends, coworkers, and family members who might be open to this message and tell them about the podcast. Have them start with episode 38, The Why of FI, and right behind that, have them go listen to episode 21, The Pillars of FI. It is a fantastic starting place. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.